We're like, what are we going to do with no budget? How can we do this? We got to get really scrappy. We don't have any money to spend. We have to be break even or profitable every month we can.
Can you remember the first time you made your online sale? Or the first time that a retailer agreed to carry your product? So exciting. But what if you can't meet demand of your online customer base? Or all of a sudden your design process is slowed and shipments are delayed? That's when the real headaches come in. But when your mission and your product is something you truly believe in and think it can leave a lasting impact, you take all the good with the bad and keep pushing forward. For Stojo, a company that produces collapsible, leak-proof cups and containers, there have been wins and losses of every kind. And CEO Jurrien Swarts has been riding the waves as his company tries to get a piece of this $22 billion industry. On this episode of Up Next in Commerce, Jurrien takes us through what it has been like to design, launch, and distribute Stojo's game-changing products. Plus, he guides us through how difficult it is to scale and market a business, and what it takes to make hard choices like laying off and rebuilding a staff. Enjoy this episode. Before we get into the episode, I would love it if you could hit subscribe and give the show a rating and review. I really want to know what you think and hear how we're doing. All right, on to the interview. Really quick, I want to say thank you to our awesome sponsor, Salesforce Commerce Cloud. And I'm going to allow them to give you the inside scoop into some of the findings from their most recent State of Commerce report.
Hi, this is John from Salesforce. Did you know that companies of all sizes and industries power their digital customer journeys with Commerce Cloud? Salesforce Commerce Cloud delivers B2B and B2C commerce, as well as order management around the globe. And with Commerce Cloud, you can engage with your customers anywhere and personalize interactions everywhere. Scale and innovate with ease and drive some serious growth for your business. And speaking of innovation, we recently surveyed nearly 1,400 commerce leaders and analyzed the consumer shopping and business buying behavior of more than 1 billion customers worldwide. And we uncovered emerging trends that will influence how companies can be successful and stay ahead in this ever-evolving landscape. To check out the trends we discovered, go to sfdc.co/commerce insights. That's sfdc.co/commerce insights, one word.
Everyone, and welcome back to Up Next in Commerce. I'm your host, Stephanie Postles, CEO at mission.org. Today, I'm chatting with Jurrien Swarts, the co-founder and CEO of Stojo. Jurrien, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. So I was looking through Stojo a bit and your background, and what was very interesting to me, you can tell me if this is wrong, but I saw a quote where it's like you and your co-founders were reading 4-Hour Workweek. And that's like how this came about, which to me was kind of wild because everyone's read 4-Hour Workweek, but I've never actually heard of someone creating a company based off that model. So I wanted to hear a bit about like what was going on back then. Tell me the whole story.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. So I was at Credit Suisse and had a colleague. He was actually my manager. We got into this habit of going for runs every day during our lunch hour. And we kind of had this like 2-guy reading book club going. And so one of the books that we eventually got to was Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. And so, you know, if you've read it, you could either create something because you're a creative, which today I'll call myself a creative, but at the time I was like, I'm not a creative. I can't sing, I can't write, I can't. And then so they were like, but you could also make something, preferably in China, I think was the guidance. And I said, well, I speak Chinese. I've always had a thing for product and design, just personal interests. And why don't we see if we can come up with one of those? And so we started to brainstorm. And, you know, a few weeks after having read the book, or even maybe a month, Alex comes in and he goes, I got the perfect idea. How about a collapsible coffee cup that goes in your pocket so it's easy to take with you on your commute and travel? And, you know, I was like, that's not a great idea. I didn't really like it. I was just kind of like, nah, whatever. I think another couple of weeks passed by. I was actually in the shower where I have a lot of aha moments. And what's funny is the more I talk to other founders and people, a lot of people have a place where they have their aha moments. And for me, it's driving on the interstate, long haul between homes or whatever, or in the shower. I had a vision of my grandmother's daycare kind of set up where she used to have the dishwashing rack, and she'd always have all the baby bottles lined up, taken apart. And if you're familiar with those, they have a plastic reservoir, a plastic collar, and a silicone nipple, and it creates like a leak-proof type of seal with the screw on. And I realized that if I took a collapsible, dog bowl or Sea to Summit type cup and put a lid on it like that, we actually could create this leak-proof coffee lid that would actually, help make this thing, work. And when I had that discovery, did some sketches and figured out that, hey, we're onto something here. And that's how it all started. That was 2011.
So let's get back to your aha moment in the shower. You're like, I know how to create a collapsible cup that won't leak. What did the process look like after that?
Yeah. So just, again, dating it 2011, 12, rapid prototyping was just becoming a thing. They had things like the first 3D printers, et cetera. And so when you're making a durable good, you have the industrial design thing, you have the CAD files that have to get developed. And when we went and priced that out, we were getting kind of like quotes of $30,000 to kind of get to a prototype and maybe one or two iterations, way beyond the budget of what our significant others were going to allow us to spend. My co-founder, Alex Abrams, was the guy that I worked with at Credit Suisse. When we got that price tag, we knew there was no chance that our wives were going to sign off on that. So we were just kind of like, okay, this is done. A month later, Alex is at a Halloween party with his kids, and he runs into Ben Mellinger, who he was a fraternity brother at UPenn with. And Ben had been a consultant and quit that job to work on a water bottle, a concept he had for a water bottle. And so he self-taught himself how to do CAD drawings. And we said, Ben, how's that water bottle going? He's like, I don't really know how to get it launched, et cetera. Well, we have a project for you if you're interested. And he said, sure. And so we made him an even partner, and he did the CAD for free. And then we started prototyping, and that's how we kind of took it to the next level. So for anybody who wants to do a product design thing, if you don't have the money for a designer, an industrial engineer, and you could expect to spend anywhere from $20,000 to $50,000 just to get that design work and prototyping done, find a co-founder who can industrial design and bring them in. It's the best way to do it, because there's going to be countless iterations, and you want somebody who's really vested in the product to make sure that what you come up with is really exceptional, and it's not just somebody who's doing it as a consulting gig and just wants to check it off their their list and move on to the next project.
Yeah, I was going to ask that about how do you view, it seems like now, especially maybe back in 2011, it was definitely probably newer, but now it seems like everyone is kind of doing that, launching quick, getting prototypes quickly. Do you feel like it's in a different place now where you can maybe just go on an Upwork and, hire someone to create like 20 different designs for you? And like, do you think the world is different now where you might not actually need to find a co-founder?
Yeah, I definitely think that. I think if, the power of Upwork and 99 Designs, things like that, is that it's open to folks who are living in areas of the world that are, much cheaper to live in. And so you can actually get incredibly good work out of Eastern Europe, out of parts of Southeast Asia. Yep. I've definitely gotten lots of help there. It comes down to your aesthetic and your attention to detail and your ability to curate and manage that process. But for anybody starting out, I'd say go for it. What do you got to lose other than some time and money? And usually you get really good learnings from that stuff. So I think that's totally a viable place to go. The other one is if you're a college age or recent graduate and you had an engineering school in your school, you might have people that you can find that way as well. Yep. Who'd like to do it just for portfolio building or just maybe you want to start a company together.
Yeah. Love that. So what was your first sale like? Do you remember getting that first sale? So
we had kind of two first sales, if you will, right? So we're an omni-channel business. So we have our website and we do Amazon, and then we sell to brick and mortar retailers, right? So the first sale was when we launched our Kickstarter in June of 2014. But when we got that first backer, and then the euphoria around that, having, created a product, done a video, put together a campaign, and then pressed go it was really, really incredible. And then what was kind of the fun thing about that was we went from, $0 and passed our goal of 10,000 prior to midnight that same day. So that was really great. And ultimately we did like, I think it was $128,000 on Kickstarter.
Mm-hmm.
So 12, 13 times what we'd set out to raise, which was, we needed the 10K to kind of cover the tooling. So that was really exciting. And then when we actually went commercial, so I left my job at Credit Suisse in the summer of 2015. The coolest thing was when the Moment Design Store buyer came and kind of found us somehow, probably through Kickstarter, and asked for samples, and then they actually bought our cup, and so we were being sold in the Moment Design Store as kind of like our first retail relationship. So that was really special as somebody who cares about art and design.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then after you were there, is that how other stores, I think like you're in Anthropologie, I think like Whole Foods, like is that how they found you, by just having that first retail customer, or did you get those partnerships in other ways?
I mean, that was a slog. So, 2015 until May of 2018, I was a one-man band. So my co-founders kept their day jobs. We're involved in various ways, but for all intents and purposes, I was the one that I was all in.
Yeah.
And so I had to kind of learn and teach myself every aspect of the business. Frankly, I wasn't very good at the sales part of it. And we got a little stop-start with Bed Bath, but our packaging wasn't quite right. We had supply chain issues just because of cash flow, and we didn't have the right merchandising. So it took bringing on a professional consultant who's actually still with us today, is great, who really knew the retail category, and specifically hydration and coffee tumblers. It's a pretty big category in the US. It's like a $22 billion segment. Wow. And if you think about it, every major retailer, gas station, dollar store, every store is selling hydration. So getting somebody who really knew how that worked, and then just slogging it out for a bunch of years, going to the trade shows, getting press where you can, evolving our product. We started out with a 12-ounce cup, which was great for a New York City-based commuter who goes to the corner deli and gets the 10 or 12-ounce cup of coffee. That's kind of the standard coffee in New York City. And it also works out really good for the UK, Australia, countries where they drink smaller beverages. But guess what? In the US, most people drink 16 or 20 or 24-ounce coffees. Intense. So our cup actually wasn't really optimized for scaling in the United States. So it took until 2018 till we introduced what we call the biggie, the 16-ounce cup. And we added a straw because southern part of the country actually drinks a lot of sweet tea, iced coffee for most of the year. So moving away from a hot only small single serve cup of coffee to like something that's more kind of common to the US market, that really helped propel us. And then we also moved away from kind of, we started with some really primary colors. And when I decided that I was going to start a brand and really grow Stojo into something, I really liked how Swell approached the market. And the way that I saw that play was they went hard after a very certain demographic of tastemaker, female, millennial, Gen Z consumers. And I saw that we could probably do something like that. And being in New York City, Brooklyn, I thought, that's a pretty natural fit for me to target that demographic and try to have my sustainable product be a almost like a fashion accessory.
Yeah.
And so when we did that, that's when I think we started to appeal to the Anthros, the Madewells, the Food 52s, the Whole Foods, et cetera. Yeah.
How did you go about that? Because I look at companies like Swell and a lot of the brands that are in Anthropologie, and I'm like, how they got there is like so much through like marketing. I mean, you can walk in maybe a TJ Maxx and see tons of Swell style, mugs and stuff like that. Where you're like, oh, it looks pretty similar. But the way they did it, like you said, attracted a certain kind of customer where it's like, I'm a fan. I'm not going to go to anyone else. Like, how did you how did you go about it to become like that as well? Like, what did you start implementing, or what kind of marketing were you doing? Like, what did that look like?
A lot of it was, I think, just intuitive in the sense that since a very young age, I was always a consumer of brand. I liked brand. I would buy products based on their aesthetic, their utility, but also what the company's doing and saying. So, like I was always, one of my favorite brands of all time is United Colors of Benetton. And what appealed to me growing up in a really small northeastern mill town, which was predominantly white, almost like, 99.9%, was seeing this just kind of like calico quilt of different representations of human beings, and bright colors, and just like everybody in the photo shoots always looked like they were having a great time. And I was just like, yeah, man, that's what I want in life. I want to be around beautiful, different people, etc. I think that kind of always stuck with me. So when it came time for me to, helm my own brand, what I wanted to do, and I was also watching things like Tom's Honest Company, looking at the Acumen Fund and their activities. And I came from Credit Suisse, where I was tangentially involved in a lot of kind of socially responsible investment activities for clients. And I said, you know what, I want to build a brand that does this, that's mission and purpose driven. On the one hand, I have my sustainability message, and then I have control over the storytelling and the imagery that I want to put out there. And what I want to do is appeal to people who want to support brands that they think are conducting themselves in society in the right way because it's the right thing to do, and not because they have to do it or because it's the most expedient or the most profitable thing to do. And so I think that's kind of the stand that I took. And then the rest was more like, because we were bootstrapped, I got a little bit more sophisticated in terms of the look and the feel of Stojo every year as I was able to hire people and bring on professionals. So when we were shooting our own photography, and I was doing my own graphic layout in PowerPoint, it's a very different look than when you start actually hiring designers and paying for photo shoots and then leveraging influencers, et cetera. So there was an evolution.
It seems like to build a brand like that, you have to rely pretty heavily on influencers. When I think about some of the brands that have really shot up recently, it does seem like that's like one of the most strategic angles, to partner with someone who has your, values and ideals, and also the audience that you want to reach. Is that like a big, part to your marketing playbook, or just a small piece of it?
It's huge. But interestingly, we've only really started like intentionally and systematically, strategically, tactically flexing into that since I'd say like August of last year. So what happened was that the height of the pandemic, we had to let go of half our staff. We were about 20 people.
Wow.
We cut back to 10, to the most necessary, and really, really hard to do. But when we did that, one of the things that kind of came from that was that we let go of our CMO, who was very high, high salary, recruited from a big place. And, the remit that he had was to help us scale this thing really quickly. We thought we were going to scale a lot faster, and we ultimately did. And when that all fell away, I just, partnered up actually with my romantic partner, my life partner, Megan. And she joined the team as a fractional kind of CMO, brand creative lead. And she started implementing all these things. So we were like, what are we going to do with no budget? How can we do this? We got to get really scrappy, and we don't have any money to spend. We have to be break even or profitable every month we can. The influencer strategy is one of those things that if your brand has the right market acceptance and fit, and you can relate to the right individuals, it's a really, really interesting way to go. So we've had a bunch of success there, but we're really still only getting started. But there's definitely a ton of brands that are kind of those like challenger brands that have done a lot of incredible work utilizing that, and we're always watching what other people are doing and learning from it. And frankly, there's a lot of us are starting to talk behind the scenes, management teams, and making intros and talking to each other at roundtables and just sharing a lot of data and information. And it's making us a lot more scrappy, successful, and we're starting to punch above our weight. I think a lot of D2C brands are doing that.
It feels like the D2C world is much more eager to kind of share best practices and talk behind the scenes versus, we have, podcasts covering basically all the C-suite. And I haven't really heard of, a bunch of CMOs getting together and talking about best practices or like the first 90 days, or CIOs. Like, it seems like it's harder to do there than all these new D2C brands who are like, yeah, let's all, grow together. Like, how are you finding that community, and why do you think everyone's so eager to kind of like work together and share successes and failures?
Yeah, well, I think it's structural, and it's generational. So if you got a big incumbent brand, they are recruiting from a very well-known set of folks in the C-suite, and they've been doing what they've been doing, and it's working, and they're sophisticated and they know their stuff, and it works for them, given their size and scale. And when you have billions of dollars in revenue and you're like, my marketing budget is 10% of revenue. When you're a millennial or Gen Z run brand, a lot of us just kind of started doing it out of, hey, happenstance or necessity, right? There's a lot of studies out there that if you're reading, the blogs and Medium and LinkedIn and stuff like that, that talk about, even the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, talk about how millennials are way more willing to share and talk about their personal finances, their negotiating tactics, how much they're making for salaries, how much they paid for their house, their car. I think there's a lot of us understand that being transparent, and we kind of chatted about it a little bit, about my personal approach to it before the show. When you share information with other people, if you're doing it to brag or whatever, that's one thing. And I think the older generation always kind of thought that sharing is distasteful. You don't do it. It's not done. But I always ask, well, I don't know these things. You know these things. I'm asking because I'm trying to gather information and make data-driven decisions. And like D2C brands are, and really good startups are all taking in data and tracking KPIs, and they're making data-driven decisions. Not to say everything's data-driven, but there's a lot more of it. And in our industry, everything's very opaque. I don't have the money to spend $10,000 for research on this one little thing, but I can certainly hop on a call, have a beer, share a coffee with somebody, and just kind of like pick their brain. And I think a lot of us are starting to do that. And when you lead with vulnerability, authenticity, these are all values that we share and aspire to on our team. And it's part of what Stojo is about. And you say to somebody, hey, I don't know everything. I'm here to share anything that you might need or want to ask. But today you have some information that I need. Would you be willing to share it? And this is how I'm going to use it. And like 90% of the time, people are super thrilled to just be connecting on a real level. And finding somebody that, oh my God, this person respects me, and like they're a peer, and like I can help them and they can help me. It's a beautiful thing. And it's really a metaphor for where we need to go as a society. Is like, instead of thinking about everything as zero-sum games, just talking about how do we all get to like happiness and balance and, Shangri-La or whatever. I'm overstating a little bit, but this idea of like, just because I'm winning doesn't mean you have to lose. Like, we can all win, and we're going to be around for a long time. And who knows, maybe one day we'll collaborate together on something, etc. So I try to foster that as much as I can. And I really encourage people who are on the fence about, hey, will this make me look weak or naive or whatever, like, don't let that get in the way. Just like, think about what you have to gain, which is like information that you didn't have before you asked the question and took that chance. What do you have to lose? Somebody that you don't really know is going to, I don't know, talk about you, or exactly. Or say no. So I think training yourself to do that is part and parcel with becoming an entrepreneur and a leader. And you can, the cool stuff about, we shared our parenthood. The cool stuff about a lot of what happens in a startup environment, and especially at me as a CEO, it's very similar to being a parent. You're kind of the CEO of the household. And a lot of the stuff that you're strong at or weak at extends to both areas of your life. And you can actually get a lot of learnings and personal growth through kind of comparing and contrasting methodologies and approaches.
Yeah, I think there's not much of a separation between those two, especially now. And the other day I did this like a human design reading and test. Have you done this before?
No,
you might like it.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah, but it's very much more. I mean, it essentially it tells you kind of like, this is the design of who you are and how you might operate. And I'll send it to you afterwards. I actually think you would really dig it. You need to have someone who like understands how to read it, but it was very applicable to like life and with kids and your partner. And then also thinking about like business. I mean, it was saying certain things to me that I think I never had words of, like, I felt a certain way. But then when she kind of went through and was like, oh, Stephanie, you are an unconscious alpha and you need to lead in this kind of way. But like, you don't feel like you should be an alpha. And like, I mean, it sounds a little woo-woo, but everything she was going through, I was kind of like,
it doesn't sound woo-woo at all.
Yeah. I mean, I was like digging it, and it made me kind of think how I even thought about myself when it came to like work and life and just how it's all kind of one and how to approach it in a completely different way than, 5 years ago where it's like, keep them separate. Don't try and mingle them together. That's when it gets messy.
Yeah.
Like it was great.
Yeah.
So I think that's where the world's headed. And certain people are trying to just adjust to that new way of thinking now. And like, is this even okay? Yes,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah. I love that. And please share.
Yeah.
When you say that, it's interesting. There's a lot of dogma that we were raised with as children that worked for, the prior generation, or maybe it didn't. And we're kind of like stress testing everything nowadays. Mm-hmm. And what's cool about the one good thing about all the information sharing and the, putting everything out there is that you get to try and think about and discard things a lot faster. Yep. And you don't have to be like pretty about it. And so I think this rapid prototyping and hacks approach that started with startups is now spilling over into dieting or not dieting, just the way you eat, the way you live, the way you sleep, the way you relate with your family and friends. And I think it's going to bring about some really rapid shifts in human consciousness for the better.
Yeah. I mean, the whole world is kind of changing that way. I think that's kind of where any bubbling up around even like the US right now is having issues because people are starting to, they're meeting people 3,000 miles away. They're finding their community in different ways. It's not all just based off like, I live here anymore. And like, we're all the kind of the same, like within, this one city. I mean, now people are thinking very different and finding their communities and having more of a voice by coming together more than we've ever had before. Like the whole world's changing so rapidly and people are trying to figure out like, how do I keep up with this? And do I stick with, our roots of like how, my parents have always done it this way? Or can I expand and, do something different and live like a nomad and go where I want and find my people and, have an impact on the world in a different way? So tell me a bit about like, was there an inflection point with the sales at your company where it's like, you were a solo person for a while, your other co-founders were working full time, you were trying to build these partnerships and you're like, I need a consultant to kind of help me with retail. Like, when was there an inflection point where you're like, whoa, now we're like off to the races. I need to hire, I need help. Like, and how many sales, if you're okay with sharing that, like, what was that level when you're like, now we're about to go fast and I need to hire quick? And
let me give everybody just a really high level overview on what happened from 2014 to today. We raised capital on Republic, the crowdfunding site. So a lot of that information is public to the extent it's appropriate and stuff. But so we were bootstrapped. I started with 125K from my family and a friend, just a small little check to get me started, plus the 128K that we kind of did on Kickstarter. And before that, I think we each chipped in 10K. I think we had 20K and then we did the 128 capital raise. We did another failed, but 20K Indiegogo in 2016, raised 125 in capital, and then did a small bridge round before I raised my first round. So I'll just lay that out because I think it's instructive and informative for people who don't come from the typical, equity raising background. So in 2015, I had a half year of commerce. That was internet and online. We did about 200K in sales. The next year we did 340,000. The next year we did 405,000 or something like that. I can't remember the exact numbers. This is all me by myself. So 2015, 16, 17. In 2018, we came back from some trade shows, and the Houseware show happens in the spring in Chicago and in Frankfurt. And I actually got some international distributors, and suddenly the orders started coming in from them because Asia and Europe were actually ahead of the curve over the US in terms of buying into sustainable, reusable products. So we actually started getting distribution in foreign countries, and the orders started coming in, and there were too many. I just had my second child was like not even a year. And so I wasn't getting sleep and I was just overworked, just, dogging it. So I had to hire a person, and I hired Jake, our COO. He's still with us today. And he came from Mellon & Getz. And I brought him in. I interviewed him on a Friday and I had him at work on a Monday. And I was like, dude, I need your help. I just was like, this is the guy. I want him in here. He started on Monday and he took over all these purchase orders that had come in. And we went from basically like, we thought we were going to do $1 million in 2018. We ended up doing $2.7 million in revenue.
Wow.
And that's when I was like, okay, I have a growth trajectory here that will look good enough to investors to try and raise a small seed round. And so I did a pitch night at WeWork, where I was using their offices. And we ended up getting, I think, second place in this pitch, so that they made a $75,000 investment. And with that, I was able to raise basically about $700K, and which brought my kind of lifetime capital raise to like $1 million. And from there, we hired the team in 2019. So I got somebody focused on sales and marketing. I got customer service. I got a designer. And then we ended up at the tail end of the year bringing on, after we did not get picked to go on Shark Tank, because we were kind of holding for that to see if we got an investment. So they passed on us. And so I decided, okay, I'm gonna plow ahead, and then beginning of 2020, I'm gonna raise another round. So we were able to get to 6.5 million in revenue, 6.5 or 6.7 in revenue in 2019, and had a team of like 10. And then the plan was to raise kind of like our mini A, or our next kind of seed B, or whatever you call it. We didn't really fit in a good category, but we're going to try and raise $2 to $4 million at like the next level of valuation. And so I started hiring the team out. So that's how from January to April 1st, we hired, and we were at 20 people. And we'd extended the last two offers right before the pandemic hit, and they were set to start on April 1st. I think we gave them their offers like the week before the pandemic hit, and they were going to start 2 weeks later. And so we're up to 20 people, and we're on a trajectory where we thought we were going to double revenue again. And what in fact happened was we were unable to grow year over year in 2020. So, we'd hired a team that was supposed to preside over a 14 or 15 million revenue company. And we were going to be a $6 million revenue company again. And so we had to cut the staff. It was really, really difficult. I'd never done that before. And that's kind of where we're at now. We're at like the 10 people kind of range, and we're starting to hire again. And, we're pretty confident that we're going to have, a doubling of revenue again this year. It's looking like a really strong year. We have some amazing, launches coming up, et cetera. So we're starting to build. But what was kind of a blessing in disguise was that when we cut back the staff last year, we realized that what we really needed to be much more scrappy was a different kind of a team than I had envisioned, because I'd never scaled a year ago, I was one person, right? So I'd never scaled before, never managed that many people, all these things. And so today, where we are today is we know much more what we need, and we have agencies to fill the gaps where we don't have justification for a full-time head. And now our kind of like our forward-looking hiring plan is much more based on profitability, certain KPIs that we have, and then just very real needs that we've already established, because we have agencies and we're paying them X, and we know when that expenditure gets to this, then we can justify a full-time head. So there's a lot of great learnings from that, going through that, even though it wasn't easy.
Yeah. Sometimes I think those forced adjustments end up being the best learning lesson. I mean, we had to go through the same thing at my company, had to lay off half the team, not due to COVID. It was back in 2019. And at the time, it felt like the worst thing that could have ever happened, crying on the phone. Most of these employees were my friends. And but now looking back and being like, so many good lessons in that, like even rethinking how to hire, like you said, like, do you actually need a full-time employee? Like, how do you justify an FTE versus an agency versus, having a one-off contractor? And it ends up being a hard lesson, but long-term, it seems like sometimes companies that go through those blips are able to come out on the other side stronger than before.
Very, very much agreed. And actually, I'll call something out. Again, I think for the benefit of any listeners who are those entrepreneurial-minded startup type people shooting for the sky, because I'm one of them, and that's why I'm sitting where I sit. But if you talk to investors, a lot of times investors are not those people. They're actually the pragmatists and the realists, and they've literally seen thousands of businesses like yours do either one of two things. And they're usually much more disciplined and pragmatic. And I think a lot of times COOs, CFOs, those type of people also tend to have those personalities. What ends up happening is, as an entrepreneur who's like, I just need to make sure that we don't stall, and we got to get it done, and I have to make a decision now so I can go on and do the other 50 things on my plate. a lot of times there's a lot of inefficiency in that decision-making process, and it's just guessing.
Yeah.
What has to happen over time is a company needs to be run less on the seat of the pants and less on intuition and much more on discipline and just, time-tested tactics of sound business principles.
Yep.
And that's kind of what at a very high level happened to you in 2019 and what happened to me. And as a founder, going through that injects you with a sense of realism, and it matures you and it gives you wisdom. I think that prior to that, because everything was on the up, you didn't really have that. You didn't have time for naysayers. You were defying all odds. And now it's like, no, it's not just about my vision and me anymore. It's actually a company, and I have a responsibility to all these people. And accounting principles are going to define whether or not I'm still in business a year from now. And I have to listen to those. And I think that's the shift that can happen. And it's really powerful when you go through that lesson. Your company doesn't implode. You come out through the other side of it. Those are learnings you're never going to unlearn,
Yeah. I also think like the emotions kind of leave the scene where it's like, during the time you're just like, horrible, crying, like, the worst. But then now when thinking about it now, like how I would even operate, it's like, you just view it as such like it is a cut and dry thing. Like you're either, you've got good margins or you don't, you're profitable or you don't. And like, here's your run rate. And like, if it's not there, it's not there. Like there's no amount of like, friendships and feel good, anything that'll fix that.
That actually ties back to that point that I made. If you don't take care of yourself first, you can't take care of others. So if the company isn't sound and it can't pay its bills and keep the lights on, you can't employ all these lovely people who, of course, depend on you and trust in you and rely on you. But you have to make decisions as the leader in ways that will keep the boat afloat or keep the greater good going. And sometimes you unfortunately have to make decisions that aren't popular, you don't like, you feel terrible about, but it's not about that.
1,000% agree with all of that. So I know we are running out of time, but I want to do the lightning round with you because I think you're going to have some epic answers. So,
oh, geez. No pressure.
The lightning round's brought to you by our friends at Salesforce Commerce Cloud. This is where I ask a question and you have a minute or less to answer. Are you ready?
Okay.
All right. First one.
I think so.
I'm secretly curious about what?
What the profitability metrics are of like the top 20 D2C brands. The real deal on the numbers.
That's a good one. Something wise my elders taught me was
to always make eye contact and listen to what the person's saying and give it a moment before you respond.
That's a good one. You're very good at that. You've made eye contact the whole time, so good job. What's up next on your reading list or on your podcast list? Like, what are you diving into these days?
So Jesse Pooge did a podcast, Invest with the Best, I think it is, where he was talking about his approach to performance marketing. And I've listened to it twice and I want to hear it again because it's so thick. That's one. Then there's this other podcast that I can share. I'm terrible with names and remembering things like that, but it was two of the original folks, the early hires at Amazon, and they talked about the Amazon memo and narrative and the PR FAQ approach. And we're actually employing that at Stojo right now. Again, very incredible paradigm shift in the way of managing and sharing and presenting information and coming to decisions. So two things that I'd highly recommend to people.
Cool. We'll have to look that one up and drop it in our show notes. What do you do when you want to feel more joy?
I like a little bit of cannabis as a nightcap, and I really like to run.
Nice. All right. Yeah. And the last one, that's maybe a little bit different than cannabis, but same. What's one thing that will have the biggest impact on e-commerce in the next year?
Oh, that's funny. That could. I think the battle of Facebook Apple. I'm really interested to see what happens there. How we figure out how to continue with attribution and respect people's rights to privacy. And I think my gut, if you think about the right thing, is we should attribute a commercial value to everybody's data. And I, as an individual, should have the right to monetize and share that data, and people should pay for it. Because I'm okay with people having my data because I think it leads to better decision making and better functionality of the whole machine. but I want to know who's got it and how they're using it. And I think there should be value for it for anybody.
Yep, I agree. All right, Jurrien, well, it's been such a fun interview. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Where can people find out more about you and Stojo?
Look me up on LinkedIn, check out Stojo's Instagram and our website, obviously. And and then give this podcast a listen.
Do it. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me, Stephanie.
Hey listeners, thanks for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. It helps spread the word, and I would greatly appreciate it. See you next time.
Up Next in Commerce is brought to you by Salesforce Commerce Cloud and created by the team at mission.org. Subscribe now at Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts.